Kurt Volker was the first individual to testify behind closed doors during these impeachment inquiry hearings. Well, he was the first one to give his deposition. Now, others who have testified have sort of contradicted him, much like Sondland. I don't think to the same degree as Sondland, but still. And one point of, I guess one point of concern is that July 10th meeting at the White House, for which Kurt Volker was in attendance. And his earlier testimony, which was released, I believe his transcript was released. But when he spoke about that July 10th meeting at the White House, he did not mention any remarks by Gordon Sondland talking about investigations. He did not mention it whatsoever. There was nothing of concern that he pointed out given that July 10th meeting. So there have been multiple individuals that have said, no, Gordon Sondland, he communicated that the meeting between the presidents was contingent on these investigations being announced, and how the former national security advisor, John Bolton, was apparently very, very disgusted, very unhappy with what Sondland had communicated to the Ukrainian official, and abruptly ended the meeting, and then compared it to a drug deal and how he was not going to be a party to it. Again, this is something that Volker did not say anything about. So, in his opening statement in this hearing, he tries to clear up a little bit.
I participated in the July 10th meeting between National Security Advisor Bolton and then Ukrainian Chairman of the National Security and Defense Council, Alex Danylyuk. As I remember, the meeting was essentially over when Ambassador Sondland made a general comment about investigations. I think all of us thought it was inappropriate. The conversation did not continue, and the meeting concluded. Later on in the wardroom, I may have been engaged in a side conversation or had already left the complex because I do not recall further discussion regarding investigations or Burisma. Third, I did not understand that others believed that any investigation of the Ukrainian company Burisma, which had a history of accusations of corruption, was tantamount to investigating Vice President Biden. I drew a sharp distinction between the two. It has long been U.S. policy under multiple administrations to urge Ukraine to investigate and fight internal corruption. I was quite comfortable with Ukraine making its own statement about its own policy of investigating and fighting corruption at home. I did not know that President Trump or others had raised Vice President Biden with Ukrainians, or had conflated the investigation of possible Ukrainian corruption with investigation of the former vice president. In retrospect, for the Ukrainians, it would clearly have been confusing. In hindsight, I now understand that others saw the idea of investigating possible corruption involving the Ukrainian company Burisma as equivalent to investigating former Vice President Biden. I saw them as very different, the former being appropriate and unremarkable, the latter being unacceptable. In retrospect, I should have seen that connection differently, and had I done so, I would have raised my own objections.
I mean, sounds like he's covering himself.
Oh,
but
does it? Does it?
It sounds like he's covering himself, but he is making clear distinctions right there. I think it's important because it, I do like the comment that he made that, what did he say? Something like, it would definitely throw the Ukrainians off.
Yes.
Like, if I'm making that distinction between investigation into just Ukrainian corruption and an investigation into Biden, if I'm making that distinction, then obviously other Ukrainian officials are going to make that distinction too, and going to be confused, and not interpret an investigation into Biden as an investigation into corruption in general.
Right.
Which doesn't seem as if Trump ever mentioned.
Right.
Corruption in general, just Biden and Burisma.
Right. I think he's doing a little bit too much. To try to absolve himself and Trump. Mm-hmm. I don't know at which point he's being willfully ignorant, but at some point he is. Think about it, because again, I believe it was October 3rd, which he testified behind closed doors. Damn, that would have been a long time ago. Maybe it was October 13th. I'm not sure. That was October 3rd. My goodness. But it was in October. He was the first one to testify, give his deposition behind closed doors. Did not testify that Gordon Sondland said anything inappropriate, and to use his word, unacceptable. He said it would have been unacceptable. So he didn't testify to that. Now he's saying in retrospect, he understands how others that have testified already, others saw that Burisma meant Biden, but he didn't make that. I guess he didn't make that connection. You know, he saw a distinction between Biden and Burisma. Now, okay, there's just one thing I got to say about this. Okay, just one thing. On July 10th, Gordon Sondland talks about the investigation to a Ukrainian official at the White House. The investigation is about Burisma. According to Volker, I believe Biden's name was not addressed. It was about Burisma. Okay, so let's say that he doesn't know what Burisma means. I mean, a simple Google search will tell you exactly what it means and how it's connected to Joe Biden and specifically Hunter Biden. But let's say,
he's an ambassador?
Yeah, he's an ambassador. Yeah, to Ukraine.
He's an ambassador to Ukraine.
Yeah, well, special envoy to Ukraine.
Special envoy to Ukraine.
But they do call him ambassador.
But
still,
like you're saying, like even if he didn't know about Burisma, which
yeah. This goes back to 2014. All right, come on. All right, now let's say he didn't. All right, didn't run the simple Google search, didn't ask anybody about it. That was July 10th. About 2 weeks later, President Trump is on the phone with President Zelensky, and he mentions the Bidens and Burisma. Wouldn't that have cleared things up for you? Now, again, if you didn't know about it on July 10th, if you didn't make that pairing, if you didn't make that connection, then you know what? I'll absolve you myself.
You're giving him
I'll give you a pass.
Okay.
But on July 25th, you definitely would have known. Oh shit, Burisma means Biden. Oh man. So when he testified, that's where I'm going is when he testified the first time, he would have already made the connection in his head that Burisma meant Biden. So if he had to have made that connection, given his own experience, then why didn't you testify to it in October?
Because he knew. Because he actually did make the connection, and he was just trying to, I guess, you know what? Not only did he know about the connection, I think he knew about the back channel.
Of course he did.
So if he didn't know about the back channel and he heard the word Burisma being used, then I can understand why he wouldn't make that connection. But I think at that moment, at that time, he knew what Burisma was, and he knew there was a back channel. So he couldn't say anything. That's the only reason why he wouldn't say anything. I can understand him not saying anything if the word Burisma was brought up. But the only reason why he wouldn't say anything at that point, probably because he knew about the back channel, and then all that stuff would blow up.
Yep.
And he probably didn't want any part of that. He probably didn't want any part of that.